I'll cut straight to the chase. My middle son is a college senior, and while he's generally a good kid, I'm a little annoyed with him right now. He just asked me for money to go on a spring break trip to Hawaii with his friends, which caught me off guard. Don't get me wrong, I want him to enjoy himself, but the way he asked didn't sit well with me. His mom has been struggling with her mental health lately, and it would have meant a lot to her if he'd stayed home to spend time with her. Instead, he seems more focused on partying on a beach with his frat brothers. I can't even blame him too much. I was the same way at his age, and I see a lot of myself in him. This whole situation actually got me reminiscing about my own college days and reminded me of a story I haven't thought about in years. Ironically, my son is the one who introduced me to this platform, so maybe he'll get a kick out of this if it gets read. I graduated from Wharton in 1985, something I'm still incredibly proud of. Back then, it was, and still is, the most prestigious business school in the world. I took that reputation seriously. I had my fun, but I also worked my ass off. It was a different time, and some of my classmates were Wolf of Wall Street level crazy. I did my best to avoid getting swept up in that lifestyle, but during my junior year, I did something a little impulsive. I was dating a Puerto Rican girl named Maria Munoz, who I still remember fondly. Sometimes I wonder how different my life would have been if I'd taken things further with her or some of my other girlfriends instead of just going home for spring break like I usually did. But Maria convinced me to come to Puerto Rico with her to meet her extended family. It was my first time on the island, and I was eager to impress her, so I agreed without hesitation. That said, I was a nervous wreck. Maria often joked about how open Puerto Rican families were, so I knew they already knew a lot about me. Thankfully, my anxiety was mostly unfounded. I got along really well with everyone, and it seemed like they genuinely liked me. Most of the trip was spent meeting her relatives, but we did have some time for ourselves. After all, it was spring break. One of those outings was a hike through El Yunque, the only tropical rainforest in the U.S. National Forest System. Neither of us had a car, so Maria's mom dropped us off at one of the most popular trailheads. We were both a little rebellious, so we planned to hike, enjoy the scenery, and sneak some rum along the way. Everything seemed perfect, until we realized the trail we were most excited about was closed. I don't remember why. Flooding, maintenance, something like that. But Maria was really upset. I tried to calm her down, suggesting we hike one of the other trails, but she insisted the closed trail was the best one. I didn't argue. I'd learned the hard way not to challenge her on things like this. Instead, I asked what she wanted to do, and she suggested we hike the closed trail anyway. I was on board. We'd come all this way, and some rule wasn't going to stop us. We slipped past the barriers and started up the trail, laughing like idiots. At first, it was exactly what we wanted. Better, even. It felt like we had the whole forest to ourselves, which was incredible given how popular the trail usually was. We hiked for a while, passing little waterfalls and admiring the beauty of the forest, all while sipping rum. It was fun, until Maria suddenly screamed and jumped back, almost knocking me over. I looked around frantically and saw it, a freshly decapitated mongoose. Its head was cleanly sliced off, and the cut looked too precise to be anything other than a knife wound. The body hadn't started smelling yet, meaning it hadn't been there long. Maria was shaking, and I was in shock. I tried to reassure her, saying something dumb about how crime in a national forest was unlikely, but I couldn't explain it myself. I put my arm around her and ushered her past the body, trying to block it from her view. We walked in silence for a while, but the mood was ruined. Maria wanted to stick to our original plan of hiking the whole trail, but it was obvious she didn't want to be in the forest anymore. As we walked, I couldn't stop thinking about what we'd stumbled upon. Hunting in a national forest so close to a pedestrian trail didn't seem legal, but that was the only explanation I could think of. Why someone would leave the mongoose there to rot was beyond me. Eventually, Maria admitted she wasn't feeling well and wanted to turn back. I didn't argue, though I dreaded walking past the spot where we'd found the mongoose again. As we retraced our steps, I told Maria to keep her head down so she wouldn't see it. But when we reached the spot, the mongoose was gone. Someone had moved it. My heart started racing, and I began scanning the trees, terrified someone was hiding among them. Instead of seeing a person, I noticed something hanging from one of the trees. The mongoose, strung up with twine, its paws tied together. A sickly green liquid dripped from its body, and it rotated slowly in the wind. I cursed it out loud, which caused Maria to open her eyes. When she saw it, she let out a blood-curdling scream. I grabbed her wrist, and we took off sprinting down the trail. As we ran, a deafening scream rang out from somewhere behind us, a woman's scream, the kind that sounded like someone was being attacked. Maria sobbed and tried to push herself harder, but she was already out of breath. I practically dragged her along as we slowed to a fast walk. I kept looking over my shoulder, bracing myself for a fight, but nothing ever happened. When we finally reached the trailhead, a park worker was waiting for us, clearly pissed off. He started yelling about us breaking the rules, but when he saw Maria's state, he took us seriously. We were taken to a ranger station, where I had to recount the story multiple times to the police. Maria's mother arrived, and we left still shaken. I never heard anything about what the authorities found, if they even investigated. Maria and I broke up the following summer and fell out of contact, so I don't know if a family ever learned more. I haven't thought about this experience in years, but it's still just as unsettling as it was back then. The worst part was that scream. We never saw anyone else on the trail, and I have no idea who it belonged to. Fast forward to last year. I consider myself a pretty laid-back guy, and the same goes for most of my friends. This happened during spring break, so I'll get right into it. The plan was simple. Me and my friends, Jackson, Ariel, and Isabel, were going to camp on a secluded beach in Alabama. No crowds, just stars and waves. We got there later than planned, parked in the closest lot, and started walking toward the beach. The place was dead quiet. No other campers, no fishermen, just empty sand stretching for miles. Isabel, who was familiar with the area, mentioned that locals sometimes use that part of the beach for overnight fishing, but that night, it was empty. Jackson and I started pitching the tents while Ariel and Isabel set up the rest of the camp. I had brought my Doberman, Bean, who loved the sand. We all got a kick out of watching him run and roll around. At one point, Ariel pointed out a car in the distance, saying it had driven by twice already. I turned and saw an old, beat-up SUV slowly rolling past on the narrow access road that ran parallel to the dunes. The car drove by and disappeared, and we shrugged it off, going back to setting up camp. By the time we finished, it was almost fully dark. We cracked a few beers and started chatting in a circle. The girls drank seltzers, which we teased them about. At some point, someone noticed a car was back, only this time, it stopped parallel to us. The driver's door opened, and a tall man got out. He started walking toward us, and the girls got nervous. Jackson and I got up to intercept him before he reached our campsite. Bean was already on high alert, so I told him to come with us. As we got closer, I noticed the man was walking oddly. He had a slight limp and stumbled a few times. Jackson tried to keep things light, saying, "How's it going, man?" But the guy didn't waste any time. He immediately slurred, "You're on my property." I told him we thought the beach was public land, but he didn't respond. Instead, he pulled out a knife. Bean started growling, and when the man ran toward us with a knife, Bean charged at him, biting his arm and causing him to drop the knife. The man screamed in pain, and I yelled for Bean to get off. He listened, running back to my side but keeping his eyes on the guy who was now writhing on the ground. Eventually, the man got up and ran back to his car, driving off. The girls wanted to pack up and leave, but I was nervous about walking in the dark with our hands full. Isabel pointed out that the guy might return with a gun, so I told Ariel to call the police. Once they were on their way, we started walking toward the parking lot with our stuff. Bean stayed on high alert, and I have to admit, he was the only reason I felt remotely safe. When we reached the car, we noticed the tires were slashed. The police arrived shortly after and helped us with the tire situation. They took our statements, and we left, shaken but grateful Bean had been there. That guy was clearly unhinged, and things could have ended much worse. It was spring break 2023. My friend Michelle and I booked a trip to Miami for the weekend. We stayed at a rental in Wynwood, about 20 minutes from the beach. The first night, we went out to some nearby bars and had a good time. The next day, we headed to Miami Beach for a beach day. Multiple groups of guys approached us, but one in particular stood out. His name was Will, and he had a charming accent and a handsome appearance. He asked for my number, and I gave it to him. Later that day, we returned to the rental and started drinking by the pool. I texted Will, and he suggested we meet up with him and his friend, Ken, that night. They came over around 8, and we all drank together before heading to a nearby bar. Things got blurry quickly. Michelle and Ken went off together, leaving me alone with Will. At one point, I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, I saw Will hovering over my drink, doing something sketchy. I immediately left the bar and tried calling Michelle, but she didn't answer. I texted her, warning her about Will, but she brushed it off, saying she was still with Ken. I walked back to the rental alone. Later, I heard the doorknob jiggling and got a text from Michelle saying to open the door. I looked through the peephole and saw Will hiding to the side of the door. I called 911, and when the police arrived, they found Michelle in a squad car. She had been lost and her phone stolen. The texts I received weren't from her. They were from Ken or Will. We canceled our stay and left Miami, shaken by the experience. The police never followed up, and I have no interest in returning to Miami after that. My name is Anna. My friend Lena and I have been looking forward to spring break for weeks. We were 2 broke college juniors, so we booked a cheap Airbnb near Charleston's historic district. By the 3rd night, we'd settled into a routine, sightseeing during the day and hopping between restaurants and bars in the evening. Early that night, we were at a small seafood spot when I got a text from an unknown number saying, "Hey." I ignored it, but then another text came through, "Look outside." I glanced out the window but saw nothing. A few minutes later, another text came through, "Anna." That stopped me cold. Lena reminded me we'd entered a giveaway at a local cafe, and I realized someone had my number. Later, at a rooftop bar, I got another text. "That's a nice red jacket." I was wearing a red jacket. We left immediately and returned to the Airbnb, locking all the doors and windows. An hour later, we ordered Uber Eats, but when the delivery driver arrived, he knocked on the door and insisted I come out to sign something. I refused, and he started jiggling the doorknob and banging on the door. Lena called 911, and the police arrived just in time to arrest the guy. It turned out he worked at the cafe and had been following us since we entered the giveaway. The rest of the trip was ruined, and I was relieved to leave Charleston. I still don't know what his plan was, but I'm grateful Lena called the police when she did.